look at your last name. If it appears on this list, your ancestor didn't simply live in Ireland, they governed it. They fought for it as chieftains, as warriors, as soldiers in the service of kings whose names are recorded in manuscripts that survived centuries of fire, conquest, and deliberate erasure. These 10 surnames appear in Gaelic annals, royal genealogies, and the military records of kingdoms that predated England itself by 1,000 years. Most of the families who carry them today have no idea what those names once meant on an Irish battlefield. Stay to number 1, because that surname belongs to a dynasty whose bloodline has been confirmed by genetic science, traceable to a single man, carried today by an estimated 3 million people across the world. Number 10, O'Kelly. In its anglicized form, O'Kelly, from the Gaelic Sealach, meaning strife, contention, war. Not the act of war as destruction, but the quality of someone who presses forward, who contests, who does not yield. The O'Kelly dynasty were kings and chieftains of Uí Néill, the ancient kingdom in what is now County Galway and County Roscommon in the west of Ireland. Their territory was one of the most contested in Connaught, and their name appears repeatedly in the annals of Connaught, one of the most detailed medieval Irish chronicles, recording their battles, their alliances, and their sustained resistance to Norman power after the invasion of 1169. Unlike many Gaelic dynasties that were absorbed or eliminated in the centuries following the Norman arrival, the O'Kelly family maintained meaningful territorial authority in Connaught for an extraordinary length of time. They were not fully displaced until the systematic land confiscations of the 16th and 17th centuries, 400 years after, the moment that ended most Gaelic dynasties. If your surname is Kelly or O'Kelly, your bloodline governed a kingdom in Western Ireland for over 1,000 years. Number 9, O'Brien. O'Brien. Descendants of Brian, specifically Brian Boru, High King of Ireland, who defeated the Viking forces at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014. The single most celebrated military victory in Irish history. Brian Boru did not simply win a battle. He was the first and only man to unify the Irish kingdom sufficiently to be recognized universally as Ard Rí, High King, not through inheritance alone, but through a combination of military conquest, diplomatic skill, and political legitimacy that no Irish ruler before or after him fully replicated. He died at Clontarf on the day of his greatest victory, killed in his tent after the battle was already won. The O'Brien dynasty that descended from him ruled Munster as kings for centuries. Their name became one of the most widespread in Ireland, carried by families who took pride in their connection to the man who drove the Vikings from Irish shores, and briefly, for one extraordinary moment, held the entire island together. If your surname is O'Brien, your bloodline traces, at least in name, to the greatest military and political leader Ireland ever produced. Number 8, O'Rourke. O'Rourke, from the Norse personal name Hrothríkr. Yes, Norse. A Viking name carried into Ireland during the age of Scandinavian settlement and adopted so completely into Gaelic culture that within 2 generations it was indistinguishable from a name that had always been Irish. The O'Rourke dynasty ruled Breifne, the kingdom straddling what is now counties Leitrim and Cavan, for centuries. Their territory controlled the narrow land corridor between Ulster and Connaught, the passage that every army invading from the north had to cross. Control it, and you controlled movement across the island. Tigernán Mór O'Rourke, king of Breifne in the 12th century, holds a complicated place in Irish history. It was the abduction of his wife, Dervorgilla, by Diarmait MacMurrough, King of Leinster, that set in motion the chain of events leading directly to the Norman invasion of 1169. One of the most consequential personal grievances in Irish history, a private act that changed the course of an entire civilization. Whether O'Rourke or MacMurrough bears the greater responsibility for what followed is a debate Irish historians have conducted for 8 centuries. Neither side has run out of arguments. If your surname is O'Rourke, your bloodline governed a strategically critical Irish kingdom, and your ancestors' personal grievance may have changed the entire course of Irish history. Subscribe reminder. If you're finding this useful, subscribe to Surname Origins. Every week, we go deeper into the history hidden inside the names people carry without knowing what they mean. Hit subscribe. The next video is O'Néill, from the Gaelic Néill, meaning champion, possibly also meaning passionate, intense, one who contends. The O'Néill dynasty was the dominant power in Ulster for over 1,000 years. Their lineage traced back to Néill of the 9 Hostages, the 5th century high king whose sons spread across the north of Ireland, establishing kingdoms that persisted well into the early modern period. Hugh O'Néill, Earl of Tyrone, led the 9 Years' War from 1593 to 1603, the most serious military challenge to English rule in Ireland since the Norman invasion. His forces defeated an English army at the Battle of the Yellow Ford in 1598, inflicting the single largest defeat of English forces in Irish history. The flight of the Earls in 1607, when O'Néill and O'Donnell abandoned Ireland permanently following their final defeat, is considered one of the most devastating moments in Gaelic Irish history. Not just a military defeat, the end of an entire order, the last of the Gaelic chieftains, the last direct connection to a system of governance and culture that had existed on the island for 2,000 years, boarding ships and disappearing into exile. If your surname is O'Néill, your bloodline comes from the most powerful dynasty in Ulster's recorded history, a family that fought English colonization for 4 centuries before finally losing the land they had held for a millennium. Number 6, O'Flaherty. O'Flaherty, from the Gaelic Flaith Hartach, meaning bright ruler or ruler of valor. The O'Flaherty dynasty controlled Eire Connacht, Western Connacht, the territory west of Lough Corrib in what is now County Galway. Their territory was so remote and so difficult to access that Norman colonization barely penetrated it. The O'Flaherty family remained one of the last substantially autonomous Gaelic dynasties in Ireland, long after the rest of the island had been reshaped by English power. The medieval town of Galway inscribed a prayer above its western gate that read, "From the ferocious O'Flahertys, good Lord, deliver us," a testament to the family's reputation as aggressive defenders of their western territory against anyone who entered it uninvited. Graine Nimhaila, Grace O'Malley, the famous 16th century pirate queen of Connacht, was connected to the O'Flaherty family through her first marriage. The west of Ireland in this period was not a quiet backwater. It was one of the last places on the island where Gaelic power still meant something real. If your surname is O'Flaherty, your bloodline governed the wild west of Ireland and earned a reputation fierce enough to be carved in stone above a city gate. Number 5, O'Daly. O'Daly, from the Gaelic Dalach, meaning one who frequents assemblies, one who participates in councils. The O'Daly family were hereditary poets and bards, the Fili, the highest class of Irish poets, whose role combined functions we would today separate into historian, lawyer, diplomat, and political strategist. In Gaelic Ireland, a poet's praise could elevate a king's reputation across the entire island. A poet's satire could destroy it. The Fili held such power that harming one was considered a serious crime under Brehon law. Even kings treated them with extreme caution. They were not entertainers. They were the keepers of legitimacy itself, the people who decided whether a king's claim was remembered as righteous or as tyranny. The O'Daly family produced generations of poets who served the great Gaelic dynasties across Ireland and Scotland. Their work is preserved in manuscripts that represent some of the oldest vernacular literature in Europe. If your surname is O'Daly or Daly, your bloodline carried no sword. They carried something more dangerous in the Gaelic world: the power to determine how history remembered every king who ever lived. MacSweeney. From the Norse Swibne, a young warrior, a fighter. Another Viking name absorbed so completely into Gaelic culture that it became the name of one of Ireland's most feared military dynasties. The MacSweeneys were Galloglass, Scottish Gaelic mercenary warriors originally from the Western Isles of Scotland who came to Ireland in the 13th century and were retained as elite heavy infantry by Ulster and Connaught kings. The Galloglass fought with the spar, a long-handled battle axe, wore mail armor at a time when most Irish warriors did not, and held their ground with a disciplined ferocity that English observers consistently described as exceptional. Three branches of the MacSweeney family, MacSweeney Banag, MacSweeney Fanad, and MacSweeney na Dituath, each controlled separate territories in Ulster and served as hereditary military commanders to the O'Donnell kings of Tyrconnell. The Galloglass were not irregulars. They were professionals, retained warriors in a military landscape largely built around seasonal raiding. Their presence on a battlefield changed the outcome of engagements. If your surname is MacSweeney or Sweeney, your bloodline produced the professional soldiers that Irish kings paid specifically because no one else fought quite like them. Number 3, O'Malaglin. O'Malaglin, from the Gaelic Mael Secnail, meaning devotee or tonsured one, combined with the name of a saint. A name that speaks of religious dedication as much as royal authority. The O'Malaglin dynasty were kings of Meath, the kingdom at the center of Ireland, the territory containing the hill of Tara, the most sacred site in Irish tradition, the symbolic seat of high kingship itself. Control Meath, and you controlled the spiritual and political heart of the island. Mael Secnail MacMurrough Ruanaid, Malachy I, was High King of Ireland in the 9th century, the man who defeated the Viking king of Dublin and briefly imposed Irish authority over the Scandinavian settlements that had taken root along the coast. The O'Malaglin kings served as hereditary guardians of Clonmacnoise, one of the most important centers of Christian scholarship in early medieval Europe. The monastery where Ireland's oldest manuscripts were written and preserved through centuries of Viking raids and political instability. If your surname is O'Malaglin or Malaglin, your bloodline protected the place where Ireland's oldest books were created and governed the kingdom at the literal center of the island. Number 2, MacMurrough. MacMurrough, from the Gaelic Murshad, meaning sea warrior, sea battler, a name that carries the sound of something ancient and coastal, something that operated at the edge between the Irish world and whatever lay beyond it. The MacMurrough dynasty were kings of Leinster, the southeastern province of Ireland, for centuries before the Norman invasion. Diarmait MacMurchada, king of Leinster, was expelled from Ireland by the High King Ruaidhri Uí Néill in 1166, the result of a complex web of political rivalries, personal grievances and territorial disputes that had been building for decades. Rather than accept exile, Diarmait did something no Irish king had done before. He traveled to England, sought the permission of King Henry II to recruit Norman and Welsh mercenaries, and returned to Ireland with a force that included Richard de Clare, Strongbow, one of the most effective military commanders in the Norman world. What followed was the Norman invasion of 1169, which changed Ireland permanently. If your surname is MacMurrough, Kavanagh, the name adopted by the dynasty's descendants, or any of the surnames connected to the Leinster kingship, your bloodline set in motion the events that began 7 centuries of English involvement. O'Neill/Néill of the 9 hostages. Number 1. This surname belongs to a dynasty so ancient that medieval Irish scholars traced its genealogy back to the first kings of Ireland in the mythological age. Its most famous ancestor was recognized as High King by universal consent, and genetic studies conducted in the 21st century have confirmed that his Y-chromosome lineage survives today in an estimated 3 million men across the world. Néill of the 9 hostages, 5th century High King of Ireland, the man from whom both the O'Neill dynasty and dozens of connected surname lineages descend. In 2006, genetic analysis published by researchers at Trinity College Dublin identified a specific Y-chromosome haplotype carried by approximately 1 in 12 Irish men, concentrated most heavily in the northwest of Ireland, exactly where Niall's kingdom was centered. This lineage, carried unbroken through the male line for over 1,500 years, represents one of the largest known genetic dynasties in human history. 3 million men worldwide carry this specific genetic signature. The surnames associated with it, O'Neill, O'Donnell, O'Gallagher, O'Doherty, and dozens more, all point back to a single man whose military and political dominance was so absolute, and whose dynasty spread so completely across the island that his descendants populated an entire country. If your surname is on this list, and if you are an Irish man, there is a measurable, scientifically confirmed probability that you are descended from the most powerful king Ireland ever produced. Not mythology, genetics. Outro. 10 surnames, 10 dynasties, 10 corridors leading back through annals written by candlelight in stone monasteries, through battles fought with axe and spear on Irish hillsides, through royal courts where poets held more power than soldiers, and through the systematic dismantling of a civilization that refused, across centuries of pressure, to completely disappear. Your name is not just Irish. It is a kingdom. It is a lineage that survived everything the world threw at it and arrived, somehow, at the present moment. Still here, still carrying its history inside it. Drop your surname in the comments. Tell me which Irish kingdom your family came from. And if you know the story your family carried out of Ireland, whether by ship during the famine, or by force during the plantations, or by choice in search of something better, say it. Because those stories are the continuation of everything on this list. If you made it to the end of this video, subscribe to Your Channel Name. Every week, another name, another bloodline, another history that nobody told you was yours. The next video is already waiting.